Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Mỹ Lê, and for the first speaker at today's TED Talk, I want to start this talk with a very simple question. How much do you guys think this plate weighs? Yeah, 100 grams maybe? Right, to most of us, this looks like a normal plate, right? Honestly, it's the kind of plate that you could find in almost every kitchen, or the kind of plate that you could purchase at almost every department store. Honestly, there's nothing really special about it. But let me tell you, for my father growing up, this wasn't just an ordinary plate. This was the only ceramic plate that his family owned. Imagine a family of 5 people sharing this one singular plate for every meal. My father grew up in a world where having enough was a luxury. And in his childhood, his food was very limited, and so were his opportunities. They were incredibly rare. Because of that, he thought his life would stay the same forever. Then on one rather usual evening, while dropping off a relative at the airport, something caught his attention. It was an airplane, a Boeing 707 to be exact. Now again, for most people, this just looks like another plane leaving the runway. But for a boy that went to sleep hungry, that plane looked like his only hope. It looked like a promise for a brighter future. And in that moment, he made it his only goal was to control that machine. That meant he wanted to become a pilot. But we all know dreams like that, they cost money. And his family, they were barely making ends meet. He did not have the right clothes for interviews. And he definitely did not have money for flight school. But one thing he had, and one thing that no one could take away from him, was his resilience. He refused to give up piloting, and he would study so late into the night to stay on top of his class every single school year. Then something very unexpected happened to my dad and his family. Before my dad graduated high school in 1991, my grandfather used to work at a gas station. Now, the owner of that gas station knew what my dad was capable of and how hard he worked for his dream of aviation. So one day, he offered my dad to connect with an agency to receive a full scholarship to study at an aviation institution. Knowing my dad, he did not waste this chance at all. He did everything he could prepare for it. Whether it was reading books about flying in his public library or studying so hard every night and pushing himself harder than ever in those last few months of high school. And at the age of 18, all of those efforts finally paid off. He managed to receive a full scholarship to study for his dream job. He left home with only one bag, a few clothes, a wool sweater that was handmade, and a very, very thin blanket. And that was his entire year plan. Now, being far away from home meant that some nights the cold was so harsh that he could not physically rest. So he found a trick. He would lay on his stomach and wrap the thin blanket tight around his body, trying to keep in whatever warmth that he could. And after hearing about my dad's past, I thought resilience was just who he was. But my childhood, let me tell you now, it was not like his. I never knew what hunger felt like. My plate, it was always full. And the environment I grew up around in was surrounded by unconditional love. We could say my life was perfect. It almost felt like I was living on top of the world. So initially, I never knew how it would feel like to fall. Until I did. I lost my father on June 11th, 2017. The man who had always been my North Star ever since I gained consciousness was suddenly gone. And when that happened, my perspective changed in the worst way possible. Instead of acknowledging what I still had, I could only view what I had lost. Psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross described the 5 stages of grief is what someone would experience during these unexpected events. It starts with denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I believe I went through all of these stages. It started with denial. waiting by his apartment door every day, hoping that maybe he would come back for me. And anger, it would simply show up in the worst way possible, even if it was filling in a form or some paperwork that required my dad's name. It could ruin my entire day. Then came the stage where I believe I was stuck in the longest: depression. I slowly started withdrawing from everything in my life, whether it was my education, my friends, or most importantly, my family. When life kept moving forward, I was still stuck in the vivid memories of him in the past. Now, on one Saturday afternoon, while me and my mom were on our way home after a meeting with my homeroom teacher about these events that happened to my life, she then asked me a very simple question, but it made me rethink my current state. She asked me, "How are you still living in the past when I am here in the moment with you?" And that question hit me harder than anything else. Because in that split second, I realized something: that I had been viewing my life through only one lens, what I had lost. But my life, it was so much bigger than that. Yes, we can admit that my father was gone, but my mother, my friends, my family, the community around me, I was not alone. I'm not going to be alone. And my life, it isn't over yet. That realization helped me move forward to the final stage of grief: acceptance. Now, let me tell you, acceptance was not easy for me. It didn't happen overnight. It started with the very small changes that felt almost uncomfortable. Whether it was changing a habit that used to stick for years and years on end, or being present not just for the people that are around me, but for myself. And starting to appreciate the things that I used to take for granted. Instead of focusing on what I had lost, I had started noticing what was still present. And let me tell you one thing. It obviously is hard when we go through something that's incredibly painful and unexpected. We often think we need a big solution to fix it. Something that is dramatic, something that could change our life at once. But let me tell you, resilience, it usually doesn't start that way. It begins with something small: a conversation, a new manner, or reaching out to someone that cares about you, or simply choosing to show up again. Being present for people, or connecting with the people that you have around you, or someone that reminds you that you still have a purpose and you matter in this lifetime. And with all that support, something will grow, which is strength. It is the strength to pull yourself out of the bottomless pit that you are currently sinking in, one step at a time. And here's the surprising part, actually. What if I told you right here, right now, that if you're doing all of this, you're not just mentally, but physically becoming stronger? The myelin sheath was first introduced by a German scientist named Rudolf Virchow in the year 1854. Every function in our body happens because the brain, it sends out messages. And the myelin sheath, it is like a superhighway, taking these messages and speeding them up as fast as a Formula One racing car. For every action that is so mentally demanding, a new layer of myelin will be built. So, for the first time you guys choose a new path, it almost feels impossible because that path in your brain right now is being covered by weeds and thorns. But by the 100th time, the 1,000th time, resilience isn't something that you are born with, but it is something that you build, cell by cell, choice by choice, repeatedly. Growing up, I saw my father as a superhero. How could he have started life with only one singular ceramic plate shared by his entire family, but somehow still build a life that reached for the high skies? I used to wonder how he can endure so much pressure without breaking. Now I think I understand. We'll use an everyday example. The design of skyscrapers. We're all familiar with skyscrapers, right? In District 1, maybe, around your house. So you see, engineers, they don't build skyscrapers to stand perfectly still. If they did, the first strong wind would snap them in half immediately. So, engineers build them to move. They build them to sway, to bend, and most importantly, to adapt to the pressure. And that is what continues to make them stand tall. We humans, we aren't different from skyscrapers. We cannot stop the storms that come into our lives, but we can change the way that we see them. Me personally, I looked at grief, and for a very long time, I only saw pure resentment. But when my perspective changed, I realized something important. My life isn't shaped by what I had lost, but it was also determined by what I still had. As Maya Angelou, at the beginning of her book, Letters to My Daughter, once wrote, "You may not control the events that happen to you, but you can decide whether to be reduced by them." We cannot outrun pain and suffering in this lifetime, but we can change the way that it affects us and how we view them. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.